joint partnership between the Center for Improving Value in Healthcare, or CIVIC, the Denver Hospice, and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. We will be recording this webinar. We'll send you that information, but it will be on the CIVIC and the Denver Hospice website. If y'all have any questions, see at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A. Please put your questions in there. We'd anticipate we won't have a lot of time for questions, but we will get you the answers and send out that information after the webinar. And if you have any technical difficulties, there's a chat box at the bottom. Just feel free to send a chat and we'll help kind of navigate those difficulties. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our presenter. We have Melissa Davis from the Denver Hospice with us. Melissa is a licensed clinical social worker. She is just really passionate about working with those with chronic disease and helping patients and families navigate those difficult conversations and just transitions in life. Melissa also sits on the ethics committee, so she really gets to see what happens when patients don't have those documents in place, or when families really disagree because they haven't had those conversations. So with that, I will turn it to Melissa.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone who's joining this webinar. I really appreciate everybody's taking interest in this. These are really uncertain times, and I think that sometimes the best thing that we can do to combat fear is to control what we can in our lives. And there's a lot of things we can't control right now, but advanced directives is not one of them. And so I thank you all. I'd also like to thank the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and the Center for Improving Value in Healthcare, as well as the Denver Hospice for getting this organized and putting it on for all of our communities here in Colorado. On that note, a lot of what we're talking about today is going to be a very kind of general overview of advanced care planning and advanced directives, but some of it is specific to Colorado. So if you're out of state or if you're thinking of a loved one out of state, it might be worth looking into what differences that state has in terms of which forms to use, which ones need to be witnessed and notarized and that kind of thing. So what are we talking about when we say advanced care planning and advanced directives? Really, we're asking the question, if you were to become unable to make decisions or speak for yourself about your health care, how would your loved ones and healthcare team know what you want? And so the preferences that we're talking about might include what kind of care you want, what kind of treatment and interventions you want, and also maybe what you don't want. Also, who do you want involved with your care, and who is the best person to speak for you if you're not able to? And when I talk about not being able to speak for yourself, there's a lot of situations and reasons that might happen. It could be because of a long-time illness that's affected your ability to think about and process your medical decisions. It might be something more acute, like a car accident, falling off a ladder, you know, something like this. And so because none of us know what's going to happen in our lives, that's why we talk about how important it is to write down your wishes. And there's some that really, we'll talk about this, that all adults should be thinking about. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So advanced care planning refers to an ongoing process of thinking about and expressing your wishes. And I say ongoing because what's right for me today might not be right for me in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years as my life changes or my circumstances change or even my health changes. And so an advanced directive is the actual form where I've written down what those preferences are. And we're going to talk today briefly about the different kind of forms, hopefully help you to understand the difference between one and the other so that you guys can all take this forward into your lives. So first of all, why is this important? I think it's very empowering to do this process. People, you know, sometimes say, oh, it's all doom and gloom, talking about worst case scenarios. And the thing is, you know, worst case scenarios are going to happen in our world. And so regardless of if we've done this. And so this can actually be an opportunity to really empower yourself. And like I said at the beginning, take control over this. I mean, if you don't say anything about it, how's anybody going to know what your wishes are? This is about your voice, your life, and making sure others know how to honor your wishes. It also promotes good collaboration with your healthcare teams. So if I am a part of your healthcare team, maybe I'm your doctor, somebody else, and again, I don't know what your wishes are, then it really decreases my ability to honor those choices. I also say that it can be a gift to your loved ones. And this comes from experiences that I think most healthcare professionals have had at some point or another, that someone presents to them without the ability to make decisions for themselves, and their loved ones just aren't sure what to do. And I've worked with people who say, oh, I'm making this decision. I really hope that it's what my mom would have wanted, but I don't know. And I'm thinking of somebody in particular who told me after her mother had passed away, gosh, I have to live with these decisions the rest of my life. And I don't know if I did the right thing. And so having these wishes written down can really be a gift. Maybe it's not about you, maybe it's a gift to your family members. And so what can happen without advance directives? And then we'll get away from the negative and talk about what we can do. So without advanced care directives, we can see caregiver distress. Like I was just saying, it can be really hard, especially in the middle of a crisis, to know what to do without that roadmap. It can also cause family conflict. I've seen, and we'll talk about this more in a moment, I've seen a lot of times when family members disagree about what the right thing to do is. Everybody wants to do the right thing usually, it's just everybody disagrees about what that looks like. And so again, without that roadmap, without those directions, sometimes families can get into conflict with each other, and that's perfectly natural. And also, as I said, it's a lot harder to honor somebody's wishes if we don't know about them. And so it's great to have it written down. There's a lot of examples in our history, in our recent history, about what can go wrong. One of the more famous ones is Terri Schiavo. This was 25 years ago, but she wasn't the first and certainly won't be the last person, and hasn't been there. You can find very recent and current situations. But Terri, I like to talk about her because I think it's really impactful. She was a young woman in her 20s who suffered a significant cardiac event and was left on life support, and her husband tried to support her with different therapies and interventions to try to help her get better, and then decided it was time to withdraw life support, saying that that's what she would have wanted. Other family members, her parents, said, no, that's not what she'd want. She would want to be kept alive under any circumstance. That's absolutely what she would want. And so what ensued was just years of court battles. And I think about the distress that caused that family, and potentially the trauma that it caused all of them to have to go back and forth. And again, I'm not here to say what's right or wrong decision. I just hope that people have expressed their wishes and their decisions so they can be honored. So that's all the negative. Hopefully now you guys see exactly why we're going to be doing this and why it's so important. I did want to share a couple of statistics because I just think they're just so wonderful. So I took this straight from something called the Conversation Project Starter Kit. And this is a resource we'll talk about at the end when I'm talking about resources. It's such a great booklet of just helping people to get started with this process. That's why this presentation is called Getting Started. It's sometimes just getting off the ground that's hard. So the first statistic there is 92% of people say that talking with their loved ones about end-of-life care is important, but only 32% have actually done so. The last statistic on there says, similarly, that 97% of people say it's important to put their wishes in writing, but only 37% have actually done it. And so what that tells me is that there's just this gap in ability to get started. Maybe it's, I don't know which forms to use, I don't have the forms, or I don't know how to start the conversation. So those are the three things we're really going to talk about today. Again, kind of a high level, but as Jen said, any questions that you have, put in that chat box. We're going to be putting together questions and answers, frequently asked questions kind of document to hopefully get at some of the details that maybe you guys need as well. So the first category, I should say, of advanced directives that I'm going to talk about answers the question, who will make medical decisions for me if I'm not able to, if I'm in one of those situations where I'm just not able to make medical decisions. So ideally, we will all have, us included here, will have what's called a medical durable power of attorney. This is different than a financial power of attorney. And everything we're talking about today isn't about bank accounts and property and things like that. This is all about healthcare. And so what happens with a medical durable power of attorney, and we'll go through actually how to fill out one of these forms in a minute, but I would fill this out if I am of sound mind and I say, I want this person to make decisions for me if I'm no longer able to. That's it. That first condition is really important though, that I am of sound mind, that I do have decision-making ability. So very common question is, what happens if somebody does not have that decision-making ability at this time and decisions need to be made? And so obviously that person can't appoint somebody if they're not cognitively able to. And so often what happens next is the appointment of a proxy decision maker. And this process, it pulls all of the people that are interested parties in that person's care. So let's say I don't have decision-making capacity at this point and there's no medical durable power of attorney. And so the people around me will hopefully get together and decide and nominate one person to be what's called a proxy decision maker. And what's really important with this, and I should have said this even before, in some states, if I don't have decision-making ability and I don't have a medical power of attorney, it automatically defaults to somebody like my spouse or my partner or my parent or you know, a whole different line of people. That is not the case in Colorado. And so if you hear one thing today, make it be that, because I think that that's a huge misconception, that I don't need an advanced directive, I don't need a medical power of attorney, it'll automatically be my husband. That's not the case. And so that's why having that medical durable power of attorney is really important. But if it's not there, a proxy decision maker is nominated by everybody. Obvious question, what if people don't agree? Because that happens, absolutely. That'll surprise nobody that happens. And so if there's conflict about that, family members can petition for guardianship is what it's called. And so it's asking the court to say, hey, I think I should be this person's medical decision maker, and it does have to go through the court. There's opportunities for emergency guardians, but obviously there's a time issue with this. It's not an immediate process, and also some cost involved with that. There's one other thing that I'll just mention briefly, and if anybody has any questions about it, definitely ask us more. For the last 4 years or so in Colorado, there's been something called a proxy decision maker of last resort. I'm throwing a lot of really exciting terms at you all, but what that is if there's nobody that can be a proxy decision maker, sometimes in certain situations, a doctor can volunteer for that role. There's some very specific rules that have to be followed about how to do this and the process, and that person cannot actively be your doctor anymore. And so there's some rules around that, but that is an option as well. So obviously you're here because you're interested in these kind of things. And so we certainly feel that nominating a medical durable power of attorney is the best of those options to make sure that your wishes are known and voiced by the person you want. And so we're just going to briefly go through this form, and this is kind of a generic one. There's other kinds of forms, but this is a pretty basic one, and it absolutely works. And we just want to show how easy this is. So under number 1 there, it says, I, Declan, that's me. So I, Melissa Davis, and hereby appoint, and I write the person's name, whoever I choose. And it's worth thinking about that it might not be the person that's closest related to you. It might be the person who you think knows you the best and will speak up for you the best and honor your wishes the best. So have some thought about who is the best person for that agent. Obviously, some contact information would be important there so that we being your healthcare team, know how to contact that person. Below are opportunities to have alternates. So if that first person isn't available or unable for any reason to serve as your medical durable power of attorney, who do you want? There's room for two alternate agents there. That's optional. You don't have to fill that out. It's okay if you do, it's okay if you don't. Under section 2, it asks, when does this become effective? If I appoint this person to be my power of attorney, my medical power of attorney, do I want them to have access to my health care, have some decision-making authority right now? Or do I want it to wait until I don't have that decision-making capacity? Again, either one's fine. You just have to initial which one you choose. Under section 3 is an opportunity to state some things that maybe are really important for you that you want your agent to remember, using a lot of different words. Here on this form, agent means you're the person making decisions for you. Under here, you can leave this blank, but if there's something that you really want them to know, put it down, absolutely. For some people, it's because of my religion, I don't want any blood products. I don't want IV transfusions, anything like that. Absolutely put that there. Then at the bottom, you sign and you date. It really is that easy. So, and something that I'm really excited to share with you all is that any of the forms that we're talking about today, if anybody would like a free copy of it, please send us a message. You can, I have my email and my phone number at the end of this presentation, and the Denver Hospice will mail you out one for free. It's that important to us that we are able to honor your wishes, and so as a healthcare community. So what do you do with this now? I've got it filled out. It doesn't need a notary. It doesn't need any witnesses or anything like that. Keep a copy for yourself, of course. I suggest getting a copy to the person who's going to make decisions for you so that they have one. And I would give one to your doctor as well, especially if you have a doctor, primary care physician, somebody like that, or oncologist, whoever's really involved in your care. Also, keep a list of who you sent copies to, because it changes. Like, I have one of these done, but it changes every once in a while. And so if I change the form, I want to make sure to tell all those people that I sent a copy to that I've made changes, destroy the old one, here's a new one. And so keep a list of who you sent it to so that you can send them a new one if need be. So the other category, advanced directives, that I really want to talk about answers the question of what kind of medical care, treatment, interventions, that sort of thing, do I want to have? And so one of the best ways to have this all written down is what's called a living will. This is obviously different than a final will and testament. This is a living will, which, as it suggests, as the name suggests, it talks about what kind of care do I want while I'm still alive. And there's a bunch of different kinds of these forms that go into varying degrees of detail. The picture that I've got on your screen there is a pretty basic one, again, one that we would be happy to send to anybody that wants one. It basically says, if I'm in this kind of condition, this is the care that I want. So for example, when I talk to people about these kind of things, a lot of times they say, if I'm in what we call a persistent vegetative state, I know it's more commonly called things like comas or anything like that, but if I'm in a persistent vegetative state, this is the kind of care I want, or I don't want. This is where I would write down that I don't want to be on life support, or I do, and that's absolutely fine as well, but it's a chance for us to write those down. Also, anything else that's personally important to you that you want to make sure that people know about your preferences. The 5 wishes, which is on your screen as well, it kind of combines a few things, and it's a really great, it's several pages, but it combines the medical durable power of attorney and a living will. And it really talks people through the decisions. And so it asks questions for you to think about, like, what's important to you? What's important that, is it important for you to not have any pain? Is it important for you to be given every opportunity to fight an illness, that kind of thing? It really talks you through. There's also just tons of languages that it comes in. And so if language is a barrier, there's options there as well. One other thing that I want to talk about is about DNR forms and a MOST form. Now, this is a little bit different because everything that we've talked about up until now is something that really any adult can write for themselves and probably should be thinking about. If you ask me, I'm obviously biased, but if you ask me, everybody should be thinking about a medical durable power of attorney because we never know when we might need one. The next two are doctor's orders. And so they're really more commonly used when people have significant health problems already, but they do or do not want specific kind of care with regards to that. So the first one we've probably all heard of is a do not resuscitate order. It is just saying simply, I do not want cardiopulmonary resuscitation if my heart stops and I'm not breathing, and a doctor signs it. Again, this is a very personal decision, and nobody here is here to tell anybody what to do. But I would encourage people to have conversations with their doctors about the success rate of CPR, because it's not like it is on TV. I'll give that away right now. I'm not a doctor, but I know that. and what it entails, what it does to the body, and what recovery from that looks like. Unfortunately, it's not like in the shows where you shock somebody and you pump on their chest and then they jump up and are dancing the next day. And so it's worth having those conversations. One step beyond that is what's called the Medical Orders for Scope of Treatment form. We call it the MOST in Colorado. In other states, they have something similar, but here in Colorado, it's called the MOST form. And I'm just going to show, I know this text is way too small, but just so that you guys are familiar, it's always printed on a bright green form, like on that previous slide there. And so it's really easily identifiable. In section A there, it gives the opportunity to say yes, CPR or no CPR. So it still has that, but it goes into more detail. So section B talks about if I get sick, what extent of treatment do I want? Do I want the full works? Do I want lights and sirens and bells and everything else? Maybe I want some treatments but not others? For example, maybe I want to avoid being intubated, having a tube down my throat to help me breathe. And then the last one is comfort focus, saying, hey, I want to be at home, I want to be comfortable, I don't want a lot of invasive treatments. And so that's an option there as well. The third one talks about artificially administered nutrition. Hard to say. This is talking about feeding tubes, things like that, that if you're not able to get nutrition in the traditional way, how do you want to do that? Or do you maybe not want those kind of interventions? And then the rest of the form is a place for people to sign. A doctor needs to sign this one as well. So hopefully now you know the why we want to do this, and we hopefully have you thinking about what kind of forms you need, and now where do you get them? And so like I said, probably the easiest way is to just give us a call, send me an email. Again, I've got that coming here soon. Also, though, we wanted to point you to some websites of what we're talking about. So the first one is the Conversation Project, which, like I said, has this just fantastic booklet that really walks people through this. I don't get paid by them or anything. I just really love that form. And so then the other one is something called Your Right to Make Healthcare Decisions. And this little booklet, again, we'd be happy to send you one if you need it. It's got some information about what I just talked about, but then it also has actual forms for you to fill out. So it's a lovely one. The Colorado Care Planning website has some really good content as well. I've put on the 5 Wishes website there. There is a cost to order them. So again, if you just need one, let me know. We'll send it to you without any cost. And then in this time, I mean, we're not talking about advanced directives because of COVID-19, but it's certainly out there, isn't it? And we're certainly all thinking of it. And so we really wanted to include some resources that specifically address that and specifically address making medical decisions in the context of COVID-19. And so there's some links there, a really good YouTube, again, by the Conversation Project. I'm not on their payroll. And then also just a one-page kind of treatment support guide. And so it helps walk through different decisions that may need to be made for somebody who's experiencing COVID-19 symptoms. So now that we have the why and the form, the other biggest barrier that we have identified is actually, how do I begin this conversation? Where do I start? And so again, I've taken this right from the Conversation Project Starter Kit, but just some ideas about how to break the ice. Maybe I'm the person wanting to do advanced directives for myself, and I need to think about how to bring it up with my family. Or more commonly, people ask us, how do I start this conversation with my loved one who I'm concerned about or who I just don't know what they want? And so there's some great ideas here. For example, just saying, hey, I was thinking about what happened to Uncle John, and it made me realize I don't know what you want at the end of your life. It can be saying something like, I need to talk and think about the future. Will you help me with that? Because I think a lot of times our loved ones aren't going to say no to helping you if it's put into that context. You can also say, hey, I heard this awesome webinar today and it really made me think. And you can start it off that way. I think that the when of when to have these conversations is sooner than later. I can tell you that people avoid it because it can be a hard conversation. And especially if it's gonna cause any family conflict, anything like that. But I can tell you the family conflict or the difficulty of the conversation isn't gonna go away. And it's gonna be far harder to have these conversations in the middle of a crisis, in the ER, for example, where emotions are high and people are really struggling to grasp this. It's much better to have these conversations in a calm moment, in a peaceful moment. And just because we're not bringing it up doesn't mean that the person isn't thinking about it. Something to keep in mind too. So what to talk about, just in our last couple of minutes here, when I love some of the things that they talk about here. So when you think about the last phase of your life, what's important to you? What do you want it to look like? Where do you want to be? And so all of these questions just really kind of are open-ended, because maybe, you know, if I ask what's important to you at the end of your life, I've had people say, I want to be cremated. Okay, let's write that down. Let's have that conversation. Let's get that organized. But I'm talking about while you're still alive, what's important to you. And what people say is really going to surprise you. Often I'm thinking over here, and then the person really surprises me saying, I don't care as long as my cat can be with me. Okay, great. Let's talk around that and let's find a way to make that a priority for you. And just remember with this, we're not here to judge any of us starting this conversation. A good death to me doesn't mean the same thing as it does to somebody else. And also remember that every time you start this conversation, it's not going to be this, you know, beautiful, full conversation. Sometimes you'll have false starts. And I like to think of it as planting seeds. And you never know which time the seed is going to sprout. And so just keep planting them. Keep bringing it up, have the courage to have these conversations with your loved ones, and then write it down and share it and keep it updated. So last slide for my information, planning, I just really wanted to give this its own slide. Planning doesn't mean giving up hope. Like I said, some people think it's all doom and gloom talking about it. People are thinking about this, whether we're talking about it or not. And so it can be a really great way to honor people and to give them a sense of peace, take worrying off their plate a little bit, just to go there and have these conversations. So it looks like we're right at 10:30. I sucked up the whole time, and I am just so grateful to everybody. Please make sure to get us your questions in the chat function if you're on Zoom with us. That's my email address with the Denver Hospice. If you have questions that you want to be included onto the Q&A, the document that we'll put together, or if you need any of those advanced directives to us. So, and then of course, if it's easier for you to just call and you're not looking at my screen right now, write down this number. It's the Denver Hospice. It's 303-321-2828. And just say, you know, you can ask for me, or you can ask for Julie Daly is her name, the woman who would be sending you out copies of these advanced directives, and just let us know your name and your address, and that's all, and we will get you whatever you need. So thank you all so much, and on behalf of the agencies that put this together, we just sincerely appreciate your time and your interest, and we hope that this spurs some conversations for you all. So thank you, and go forward and be well.